Introduce myself. I'm Tim Tomlinson. I have some currency in this area. My first professional job way back was as a teacher at Ladue High School, and I lived in at the time in Kirkwood, and I would come by down Warson Road on my way to Horton Watkins.
What years did you teach there?
I started in 1955, and I went on to Washington.
I had you as a teacher.
There you go. And 1968, I went on to Washington University. I like to think of myself as a professional emeritus. I'm the Emeritus Associate Director of the Morris Arboretum of the University of Pennsylvania, where I spent 20 years as basically a senior vice president at the university. I'm the President Emeritus of the Chautauqua Historical Society, and today's remarks are going to be about the notion of Chautauqua. And I'm also the President Emeritus of the Historic Elsa Foundation. And if you know the Great River Road between Alton and Grafton, Elsa is one of those really wonderful spaces right on the Mississippi. So that's what it's all about. I'm going to define Chautauqua as an American icon. And before we get too far into it, I want to be sure we have some definitional agreements. The word Chautauqua is a Native American word, American Indian word, First People word. We don't really know what it means because the Native American people do not have a comprehensive written language, so it's basically whatever somebody thinks. And so if you're looking up Chautauqua, if you Google it, you'll see somebody will say, well, it means two moccasins tied together.
Oh.
Well, you know, what is that? It is, however, a space. It is a place. And in northwestern New York, about 40 miles from Erie, Pennsylvania, maybe 70, 80 miles from Buffalo, New York, is a lake about 15 miles long and at its best about 3 miles wide. And it's called Lake Chautauqua. And so that's where we're going to be talking about that and things related to that. Piasa Chautauqua is a local term. It uses the word Chautauqua and it adds the word Piasa, which is a Native American, Midwestern, Illinois Indian myth of a huge bird that feasted on people, mostly young women. And if you drive up from Alton to Grafton on the Great River Road, you'll see on one of the bluffs a painted version of the Piasa bird. It's a 19th century image, 19th century reproduction of a 19th century image. And this talk is going to be about American social history, roughly from the 1870s to the 1920s, a period of 50 years. And it's an amazing period in American history because so many things are happening. When we think of the Civil War, for example, we're really thinking about, well, the battles and so on between the North and the South. But you know that during the Civil War, Lincoln signed the Homestead Act, and the population of the West was begun during that period. And during the 1860s, 1870s, 1880s, we were building railroads all across this country. So it's industrialization, it's immigration, there are all kinds of things going on. So it's an amazing period in American history. And one of the things that's happening in this period has to do with Chautauqua. Now, I'm going to be talking briefly about the Mother Chautauqua, which is the term meaning the main when people use the term Chautauqua, they're talking about the mother Chautauqua or one of the daughters or sisters Chautauqua. For some people, the difference in the term daughter and sister, they're pretty much, there's an interesting debate that goes on. If it's a daughter Chautauqua, then the Chautauqua says, well, I'm like my mother, and everything that I know, I get from my mother. If it's a sister Chautauqua, it says, well, I'm just as good as you are. So there you are. During this period, particularly in the 1890s, the 1900s, and 1910s, there occurred in American society a phenomenon, I call it, of what we call the tent Chautauquas. And if you think of Barnum and Bailey, if you think of the circus going from town to town to town to town across the country during some kind of a season, think of an intellectual circus or a family entertainment circus that included magicians, slideshows, reading of poetry, drawing of pictures, and so on. This was the tent Chautauqua. Some group of performers, that's the term, performers would start in a city, let's say in northern Illinois, and then they would, for week to week to week, they would move down the state, or Missouri, or Ohio, or Pennsylvania, or whatever, all across the country. And it was an intellectual and kind of Chautauqua, not the circus as we know it. In 1976, the National Endowment for the Humanities, to celebrate the 200th anniversary of the United States, the founding, the beginning of the United States, began to support new Chautauquas for a weekend. And you probably know this from, Missouri was, and still is, somewhat active, where you bring in 4 performers and they're somehow related, and over a period of 2 or 3 days, they tell stories and they entertain people. And the last of the kinds of Chautauquas are those that are connected to elder hostel programs. And these are weekend-long vacation time where you get to visit a particular place and you do some discussion, some study, and so on. So these are the faces of the Chautauqua over the 50s, until today. So I don't forget it, there is an internet website called the Chautauqua Trail. So sometime over the next several days, if you get an opportunity, put up on your web browser the term Chautauqua Trail, and you'll just see many, 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 many kinds of places where Chautauqua-like activities are going on. These things, these activities go back to the early 19th centuries, and I need to go back one. There we go. As the American West got colonized or got people began to settle in the American West, then you didn't have the kinds of city spaces that you'd have, meeting houses and so on, that you'd have churches, libraries, schools that you'd have along the eastern seaboard. So people began to meet in different kinds of forms, and mostly called camp meetings. And the Chautauquas have their beginnings in the camp meetings. The Wesley brothers, who were religious reformers in the late 18th century, actually came, both John and Charles Wesley came to the United States and continued their missionary activity here. And this has a relationship to the Chautauqua movement. There are 2 other institutions, organizations, movements that I'd like to make a note of. The Lyceum program was a program that actually was created in New England in the 19th century, And it had to do, it went back to the Greek ideal of educating in small spaces, in open spaces. And this particular movement, the Lyceum movement, was started by mill owners who said, okay, we're building these great factories and we're bringing populations in, and what we need to do is to have these populations educated in some ways. And so they, how did that happen? Sorry. So they began that movement. This was a kind of after-work movement, evening school and things of that sort. The camp meeting was a more religious effort, and you found it all over, all outside the East Coast, because the East Coast is the first settled area in our, as we moved across the continent, and now these camp meetings are happening in the heartland and in west of that. On the other hand, the first camp meeting that we know of probably took place on Martha's Vineyard, and if you're traveling in that area and you go to Oak Bluff, you can go to the Oak Bluff Camp Meeting Association, and that is the first that I know of, at least in this area. I got that. Now, the Chautauqua ideal, if you're looking at it from a scholarly point of view and an intellectual point of view, for my mind, has 4 elements. It has a platform, it has an emphasis on education, it has an emphasis on religion, and it also has an emphasis on recreation and family life. The image you see there is from a Chautauqua in Pennsylvania, about 70 or 80 miles from Philadelphia, near Hershey, Pennsylvania, Lebanon, Pennsylvania, called Mount Gretna. And I use the image because you see the Greek pillars. Show you there physically you see the emphasis on the 4 elements of the Chautauqua movement. Now, my definition of a Chautauqua is that it has a space, it has a physical space, it has public buildings, it has a program, and it's related to the original Chautauqua, which we'll talk about soon, in New York. So it's a permanent assembly. Between the period 1874 and somewhere in the 1920s, in this country, there were over 350 of these Chautauquas. They were everywhere. They were mostly in the Midwest, but you found them on the West Coast, the East Coast, and in the South. They did not survive. They fell apart because of a number of different things which we can make reference to. But the permanent assemblies that still remain are these places. So if you're on a travel and you're going from, you want to make Chautauqua the focus of that travel, then this is where we're talking about. About 70 miles from New York City on the Jersey Shore is the Ocean Grove Campground Association, calls itself a Chautauqua, still there today, still functioning today, but founded in 1869. The main Chautauqua, the mother Chautauqua, the Chautauqua Institution, founded in 1874 in northwestern New York, about 40 miles, as I said, from Erie, Pennsylvania, and on Lake Chautauqua, 1874. In northern Michigan, at the top of Lake Michigan, beyond Grand Traverse Bay, is the Bayview Association, a Methodist organization that was founded in 1875 and still exists today as a Chautauqua institution. In Maine, just south of Portland, Maine, at Ocean Park, is a Chautauqua called the Ocean Park Chautauqua, 1881, organized by by members of the Baptist Church and still functioning with a program today. It has a space. It qualifies under my definition. It has a space. It has a public program. There are some public buildings. The Tabernacle or auditorium at Ocean Park is still someplace that you can visit. The Mount Eagle Assembly in Tennessee between Nashville and Chattanooga, right at the top of the mountains. From Nashville, you drive up, you get to Mount Eagle, the Eagle Mountain, and you drive down to Chattanooga. That is the Chautauqua of the South, founded in 1883. Across the river in Illinois, north, or actually with the river, you may not know this, but the river here between Alton and Grafton runs east to west, or east to west, yes. And along that space, just below the confluence of the Illinois and the Mississippi rivers, is a place called New Piasa Chautauqua, but in the early periods, the first name of it was the Piasa Bluffs Assembly, and that's 1885. Then just north of Toledo, Ohio, Chautauqua on the lake, on Lake Erie, that is a space that still exists today. It runs a program every summer. It's got buildings that are related to the Chautauqua experience. It's a town that you can drive through, but you pay admission to get into the town because it has Chautauqua orientation. In Mount Gretna, Pennsylvania, near Lebanon, Hershey, Harrisburg, the Pennsylvania Chautauqua, I discovered a Chautauqua in northwestern Indiana. My wife and I were driving from St. Louis up to Bayview. We were going up for a national conference there of the Chautauquas. And I, by accident, discovered this spot that's about 30 acres big. It's got public buildings, and it has a 2-week summer program as a Chautauqua, but it's there year-round, and you can actually bet. So if you Chautauqua on this, Chautauqua on that, I call this Chautauqua in the cornfields, because that's what you discovered all around you. There's this spot in the middle of the cornfields, the corn and soybean fields. And then finally, the last of the permanent Chautauquas in Boulder, Colorado, the Colorado Chautauqua Association. That was founded in 1898. So these 10 sites qualify. They have a connection to the original Chautauqua. They're still running today with programs that are like the original Chautauqua. They have a series of public buildings and private homes and so on. So you have that, all that going for you. And so this is my wife. We're on a causeway walking out towards the ocean from on the Jersey Shore. Chautauqua, New York was founded in 1874 as a Methodist Sunday School assembly on the shores of Lake Chautauqua. The founder of the Chautauqua movement, co-founder, was a Methodist bishop named John Hyle Vincent. Vincent has a heartland Midwest connection because he was originally from Galena, Illinois. And he actually lived at Galena, and while Ulysses Grant lived at Galena. So Galena, or rather Vincent and Grant knew each other well. A lot of the money that supported the original Chautauqua program came from Lewis Miller, who was an Ohio industrialist and factory owner and the inventor of a combine machine that helped to mechanize agriculture, and that was the part of the way that Miller got his money. Mount Eagle, Tennessee is called the Chautauqua of the South. It's located very close to Sewanee University, and it was connected basically to the Episcopal Church of the South. Piasa Bluffs Assembly is the Chautauqua that still exists here, about 40 miles from where you're sitting today, and where I've owned a cottage since 1970. The Chautauqua at Lake Erie that I commented on near Toledo, and then the Mount Gretna Chautauqua. I'm going through these quickly because I'll come back to them. And the Colorado Chautauqua Association. I make this point while I still have it in my mind. All of these Chautauquas had a religious orientation. They were connected to some Protestant denomination. The original Chautauqua, the Chautauqua Institution, obviously Methodist, because John Howell Vincent was a bishop in the Methodist Church. In Colorado, however, the Colorado Chautauqua was founded in 1898 by members of a Texas Education Association. They were school teachers who wanted to get out of Texas in the summer so they could go to classes and they could get teacher training. And it had no religious orientation then, and it still doesn't have any religious orientation. But by 1898, they had basically leased the land from the city of, even today, the Colorado Chautauqua Association does not own the land on which its buildings are and its programs are developed. That's owned by the city of Boulder, which renews the lease every 15 years. That sounds like a lot of work, but nonetheless, it's worked over time. But once again, no religious orientation in Boulder.
Do you happen to know where in Boulder it is?
Yes, it's about. Well, let's see. If I'm thinking about for the university campus, it's about 2 or 3 miles there. I'm trying to think of the name of the street. I've driven up many times. But it's open year-round, and again, it's a public park. It's amazing. You'll drive up there. Last time I was there was springtime, and all the University of Colorado students they had picnic baskets and blankets out on the lawn, and then behind it stands this imposing big auditorium building that is the hallmark, if you will, the architectural hallmark of the Colorado Chautauqua. So, the platform. The platform to me means a kind of, but I think today you'd call them talking points. The kinds of things that people were interested in hearing, and the kinds of discussions they wanted to be part of, and they would take advantage of the Chautauqua in order to be part of that kind of thing. So what are these things? Well, all of the Chautauquas are in a rural setting. They have urban patrons. The Chautauquas were middle class. This is not Newport, Rhode Island. Okay, this is not Northeast Harbor, Maine. This is middle class people finding a way to go out and be entertained and to have some fun as a family, to find a place to just enjoy themselves. All of the Chautauquas are Protestant, but not denominational, the ones I'm talking about, with the exception of the Texas one. And at the same time, there was this effort at bringing harmony between people and therefore between religious sects. So I wrote an article for our Chautauqua Historical Society newsletter on a Jewish Chautauqua. Catholics were allowed early on into the New York Chautauqua and then into the other Chautauquas. And so you had that kind of spirit that's being moved. And also, all of the Chautauquas had educational programs. If you were to go to New York next summer to the Chautauqua Institution, there would be a school for the arts. There would be a music school. There would be book clubs all over the area. I talked one time to the president of the Chautauqua Institution. I was up there on a conference, and he was boasting. All right, he was boasting openly, as he should. He said, "Tim, we're going to have over 22,000 events this summer." Well, they covered every kind of thing. Lectures, art exhibits, music programs, had their own symphony orchestra in the Chautauqua Institution. And I like to think that in all of the Chautauquas, because I'm really basically very, very close to one of them, I've lived that experience for over 50 years now, is they are interested in what people call pay it forward. Think about the future. Think about what you can do to make the future a better place. Think about how you can use your time and your energy and your creative abilities to make things better for people who come after you. So that's what it is. The most celebrated Chautauqua person is William Jennings Bryan, the three-time unsuccessful contestant for the presidency of the United States, 1896, 1900, 1908. Bryan failed. But he was known as the great commoner because he was thought to be a person whose political life and his political energy and all of his efforts were to make things better for the common people, hence the great commoner. A poster showing Bryant as he prepared to try to become the president in one of those years. Bryant also, this is an aside, has nothing to do with Chautauqua, but Bryant also has in 1912, there was the possibility that Bryant would run for a fourth term. And the Democratic Party wanted to nominate Woodrow Wilson. And the Republican Party was going to be nominating William Howard Taft. Teddy Roosevelt was thinking about running. So we think that Bryant and Wilson made a deal where Bryant would not run and therefore divide the Democratic vote. But Taft and Roosevelt ran as one as an independent, one as a Republican, and Republicans split the tickets, and Wilson became the president because of the deal with Bryant. Bryant's payoff for that deal was he became Secretary of State. He resigned his Secretary of State position in 1916 because in Wilson's beginning his second term, because he said, "You're going to take us into the European war. I don't want any part of that war. That is not in my makeup." And so he resigned. Now, a lot of people think of Bryant as in the Scopes trial in Tennessee. He died shortly after that trial was over, Clarence Darrow and William Jennings Bryan. But if you go back and look at his political history from the 1890s until his resignation as Secretary of State, he's a pretty remarkable man. Bryan and Roosevelt, they were contemporary and always involved with one another. Now, the platform: religious tolerance, racial tolerance, women's suffrage, economic justice, prison reform, child labor laws, slum clearance, court reform, conservation of resources, tariff revision. Teddy Roosevelt was a very, very important person in the development of the environmental movement in this country. He lived during this time. He and others are making their views known at places like Chautauqua. As these 10 Chautauquas moved from town to town to town, people who were of the persuasion for racial tolerance or women's suffrage, all of these things that you pick up on podcasts. Well, this was the podcast of the late 19th and early 20th century. People went to Piasa Chautauqua, to its auditorium, to hear somebody talk about one of these things. And that's basically the platform. It's kind of a double meaning there. The platform, in my mind, first of all means, okay, what is it that we stand for? What is it that we want to bring out and promote? What is it? How do we want to do that? The other is the physical platform. Like here's my physical. I'm standing here at St. Peter's Church. That's basically my platform for today. This is the auditorium at New Piasa Chautauqua across the river in Illinois. It was the physical platform for Bryant, who came here 4 times to this space, and he talked about the things that were important to him. This is a 1,100-seat auditorium in Monteagle, Tennessee, where people like Bryant and others came and talked about what was important to them, the physical platform. This is a 5,500, too quick. This is a 5,500 seating auditorium that you can go into today in Ocean Grove on the Jersey Shore, south of New York, the platform. And this is the Colorado Chautauqua auditorium that, again, is today the space, the actual stage for many, many events and opportunities, intellectual opportunities today, built in 1898. Now, all of the Chautauquas felt that education was important. And what you see here is Defuniak Springs along the Florida Panhandle, about 30 miles north of, what city can I pick? Panama City, let's say, Florida. Defuniak Springs was a Chautauqua. It was going to be the winter Chautauqua, summer in New York, winter in Florida. But it didn't survive. It survives now in the sense that once a year for a long weekend there's a program, but it's not the kind of thing that you expect. Jefferson tells us that any nation that expects to be ignorant and free expects what never was and never will be. So we need to be educated. And so the original Chautauqua, amazing. Within 10 years from 1874, John Hyle Vincent, little place, the little start in 1874, had become basically the correspondence school of the 19th century. Today, you can get a degree online. But you could get a degree out of this Chautauqua institution in 1881. The state of New York granted the Chautauqua the right to give you a degree if you followed a certain course of study, you read a certain number of books, you took by mail a certain number of tests and passed those tests, then you were going to get a degree. The Chautauqua Scientific and Literary Circle, CSLC, CLSC, Chautauqua Literary and Scientific Circle, in 1878 was founded. It's the first book club in this country, and it was connected to the administrative program that allowed you to read these books, take examinations on those books, and then get basically college credits, degrees. And it still exists today. They run the entire program in New York every summer along the books that are connected to it. There'll be a theme. Here's the summer theme. Here's the summer theme broken down into 9 pieces, and then for every piece there's a book. And that's how you put all of that together. This is a scene from Chautauqua, New York, the Hall of Philosophy. And these are people who are going through the Golden Gates. Look at all the symbolism that's involved here. A Hall of Philosophy, a golden gate to knowledge. This is a similar building in Boulder, Colorado. If you walk through the Chautauqua, Colorado, this is the community center, and it's the education building for that. This is in Mount Gretna. Every one of these Chautauqua now has a place that is dedicated to the education theme. Women were immensely important to the Chautauqua movement in almost all of these areas. I mean, they were in the Chautauqua that I'm most familiar with. I've written several pieces that deal with the LCIA, Ladies Chautauqua Improvement Association. And it goes back to 1910. And you just see in the period of 100 plus years of history, the amazing and marvelous power of these women when they gather themselves together. Your guild and the kinds of activities that you do from time to time, that you create events, you make money, and then you move that money out into the community to do good things. And that's the kind of thing that happens in Chautauqua, at one place after another after another. This is a group of women at our Chautauqua in the 1930s. The first woman who ran the LCIA in our community in 1910, when the LCIA was founded, was a young woman, unmarried. She was the head of a florist company, and their shop was outside the big cemetery, Bellefontaine. And she and her family bought a cottage in the Chautauqua, and they used that the way people did. It was family recreation and a place to be. But it was by paying it forward. She used her business acumen, her intellectual abilities, and her desires to do things that were basically good for the community. So what are some of these things? Free textbooks, summer schools, balanced diet, physical fitness, school lunch programs, lifelong learning, education for all, the future as a good, and above all, education, education, education. And then but religion. I mentioned some of the denominations. Not all were Methodist, but the original Chautauqua Methodists. In the Chautauqua on Lake Erie, there's besides a number of churches in the town, there is a chapel in the woods. This is the Episcopal Chapel in the Chautauqua Institution. It is also shared by a Korean church, so that while it's under the purview of the Episcopal Church, they went out and voluntarily offered the space for use to another denomination. Most of this is the Catholic house at New York, and the way the houses, every denomination that has a chapel probably has a house too, and the way it works is that if you're Catholic and you want to visit the New York Chautauqua, you can try to reserve a space in a room there, and then if they don't have enough Catholics who call, then maybe somebody else can get in. But they make it available to people. They try to keep themselves going in that way. This is up in Bayview, a small chapel. And this is the chapel at New Piasa Chautauqua across the river in our community. It was built in 1925, and it is a classic one space or one frontier type of religious building. And this is an artist's view of it, what it might have looked like in 1895, except the building was 1926. So there you go. Recreation and family life was part of the pillars, the 4 pillars, the platform, education, religion, recreation. And the Illinois Chautauqua, the Piasa Chautauqua, the site was thought to be chosen because of the existence of a spring, and the spring water was actually used by people until the 1990s, well more than 100 years after its beginning. This is an artist's view of the riverfront at the Piasa Chautauqua across the river. You're looking upriver, you're looking at the confluence of the Illinois and the Mississippi coming together. This is in the 1930s, before the Great River Road was built. But the lighthouse is still there. So if you're driving up from Alton to Grafton and then beyond, you'll see the lighthouse. And when that whole area was after the 1927 floods, when they dammed it up in Alton, they created basically the equivalent of a large lake west of that, so that the river is fairly big up in that area, and so you see people sailing on it, the recreation I'm talking about. And groups of people. The building in the back of that is fronted by a large pool and a pavilion. And when part of family life and recreation is that you need to eat, so you have in all of these places eating establishments. This one, cafe in Boulder. And my sister-in-law was the president of the Chautauqua, of the Colorado Music Festival. And for years and even now, the music festival holds its summer program at the Colorado Chautauqua building. So we call it, classically Chautauqua, or music with an altitude. I like to show people some of the architecture in the various Chautauquas because part of the word permanent is that you want to like it. You want to like what you're living around. And so these are row houses. You can see them 3 stories, Victorian in nature in its architecture, in Ocean Grove, Ocean Grove, New Jersey, along the Jersey Shore. But notice the classical the Gothic architecture that exists there, and see if you can pick this up. It even extends to the birdhouse. So, dogs can swim before a certain hour. This is in Lake Erie, the family. The boathouse and Lakeside Pavilion in Lake Erie. Lake Erie. Gardening in Tennessee. Pond fun in Pennsylvania. Every one of our Chautauquas makes an effort to be in a environmentally, aesthetically pleasing space. And so that's part of what is the criteria for selecting where it is you are. This is, again, in Pennsylvania. In Pennsylvania, playground. A 1924 schematic of what the Boulder, Colorado Chautauqua looks like, the Colorado Chautauqua. And there, a kind of front view of the Chautauqua building that dates back to 1898 and still functions today. New Piasa Chautauqua, if you're driving up the river road and you pass Elsa and you're on your way to Grafton, you'll see this sign, you'll see the lighthouse, you'll see the sign that says Historic District, New Piasa Chautauqua Historic District. The community was originally named Piasa Bluffs Assembly. This word assembly is a very important word to Methodists. It's that kind of a group. They use it instead of diocese or a conference or whatever. Piasa, the mythical bird that in the area of Chautauqua, the relationship to the mother Chautauqua. New, because in 1908 it went bankrupt, closed for a year, and reopened in 1909, therefore new Piasa Chautauqua, and is that way today. It was put together by a group of collaborating Methodists from St. Louis and from the Southern Illinois Conference. And it was called the Western Chautauqua. And this is my book on the Chautauqua across the river. The reason it was called the Western Chautauqua is that the 2 conferences gave a charge. They said to a committee, we charge you to do this. We charge you basically to go out and look into the area and locate a space where we can establish a Western Chautauqua that will be emulative of the Chautauqua, New York. And so that's what we were looking at the time. And you can pass this around. The cover of the book is another aside. The cover of the book is interesting because it's a painting by a regional painter of the late 19th, early 20th century named Frederick Oakes Sylvester. Anybody heard of Sylvester? Well, Sylvester was a head of the art department for Central High School. He also was the head of art for the Principia School. And so he became, in his later life, he became interested in the area where the two rivers come together. And the cover of my book, I got permission from the Principia Corporation to use that image. In 2007, here in St. Louis, the Sheldon had a retrospective of Sylvester's work. And they had to go to the Principia because they had a massive collection of, you couldn't have an exhibition without getting those. And so the archivist at Principia selected this painting that's the cover of the book. And it was listed in their catalog as untitled. And the back of the painting was a little tatty. And so Jane, my friend, said, I'm going to get the back taken off and replaced so it looks like it came from Principia. We could stand behind it. And they did. They tore the paper backing off. And on the reverse of the painting, in Sylvester's handwriting, were the words, gold crowned. So amazingly, because of this tearing of the paper off, a painting, a picture, went from untitled to its name, Gold Crowned. And I just love the story, but I also love the painting because it's right outside our Piasa Chautauqua, and it's the kind of image you dream about, that, something like that, to come together. So take a look at the cover. It might be the best thing about the book. The Piasa Bluffs Assembly, my Chautauqua, I'll use that term. It was founded in part, the main founder was a Methodist minister. He was the editor of a weekly newspaper for over 20 years here in St. Louis, run by the Methodist Church, called the Central Christian Advocate. He was born in Tennessee. Amazing man. He enlisted in the Union Army as a chaplain in 1861. He was at the time in Zanesville, Ohio. He had been, before he got to Zanesville, he had been a president of a women's college outside of Columbus, Ohio, in Worthington, Ohio. He wrote poetry. He created short stories. He's a traveler, and so on. He wrote a letter to Abraham Lincoln that's in the National Archives in Washington, in which he said to Mr. Lincoln, he, St. James Fry, at the time was convalescing in Chattanooga, Tennessee, having marched with his unit, the 63rd Ohio, from Memphis to Chattanooga as the Union Army pressed across that territory. He said to Lincoln, I hear people saying that they are not going to vote for you, and you must come out and promote your own performance, because it's absolutely critical that you get reelected in 1864, else this war will fall apart. Now, we don't have any evidence, of any response from Lincoln. But here was a man who, a religious man, writing to his commander-in-chief saying, you're important to this cause. You must do whatever you can in order to be reelected. St. James Fry was the first president of Piasa Chautauqua. He died in 1892 of the flu. Yep. His colleague in helping to found this was a different kind of person, basically unlettered, although self-educated, And by the time he finished his career and died in 1927, he'd been granted an honorary doctorate from McKendree College, then now McKendree University in Lebanon, Illinois. This is the guy who dedicated the chapel in 1925 and preached in the chapel in 1926. Think of that. He was founded in 1885, so 40 years later, he's still playing an important part in the community. The entrance to the Chautauqua in Illinois, from the back, no river road. So if you came up by river, along the river, you came up either by boat or by rail or by auto from the interior. In 1907, this is what we think the area looked like. There was an assembly office, there was a store, there was a hotel, a kindergarten hall. Look, Hall of Philosophy, just like New York. Refreshment pavilions, a pool, a train station, a post office, a livery, a telephone and telegraph office, boarding houses, and restaurants and boat rentals. So all of the necessities for this business of recreation and family life. This is Robert La Follette, a kind of a comic view of La Follette. He was the senator from Wisconsin, who's generally thought to be the head of the progressive movement in the American political system. La Follette was on the program at Piasa Chautauqua in 1907. He would have known Bryant, he would have known Wilson, he would have known Roosevelt, and so on. But he was there in 1907. In 2007, I wrote a letter to John Danforth, who you know well, and I said to Danforth in the letter, wow, you were a sitting U.S. senator, and many sitting U.S. senators came to this Chautauqua to speak. And, for example, in 1907, Robert La Follette came here and spoke. You just have a new book, Religion and Politics. Why don't you, 100 years later, come and visit us and speak in our contemporary program? Ah, nice letter, I thought. And I got a very nice reply. No. I'm busy or I have something else to do. But the idea was there. I mean, this is how these things took place. La Follette to Danforth. This is the Piasa Chautauqua today, the town center. The middle building there was once a store, but it started out as our Hall of Philosophy. It is currently an arts center, the large middle building. The chapel goes back, I told you, to 1925. An administration building was put together in 1935, tearing down a building that I find to be a lot more pleasant than the one they put back into its place. But that's what I do. In the beginning of our Chautauqua, people stayed in tents. And that was true of all of the Chautauquas in the 1880s, 1890s. And as we became more and more along the idea of being a permanent institution, you began to get houses. This house goes back to the early 1900s. This house goes back to this cottage goes back to 1902, what you see, the lattice work along through there, in 1993, we had a horrendous flood. And the owner of the house had the house flooded. I mean, the whole first floor was flooded. So when the floods receded and we began to look forward, that he raised the house some 20 feet in order to. And by the way, that cottage was at the time of it getting raised, owned by the grandfather of young Connor Bryant. So if he were here, Connor would be looking at that and he'd say, I know that house. This is the Villa Mexico. Now you'll look at it and I hope you'll say, wow, what an interesting Gothic, Victorian Gothic design. Why is it called the Villa Mexico? Because in 1904, at the close of the World's Fair, all of the country, the national houses were basically auctioned off. And a University City physician named Grunman bought the Mexican pavilion, all of it, the wood, the glass, the hardware, the doors, the windows, and so on. He had them shipped up to Chautauqua, and then he had local carpenters put together the Villa Mexico. It doesn't look at all like the Mexican pavilion in the World's Fair, but it is related to it. This is a 1907 cottage. If you're looking at the porches, you actually see 3 porches. On the right-hand side of the screen will be the porch going towards the back, and it was a rectangular with a quadruple hip roof and 4 porches around in 1907. And the official seal of New Piasa Chautauqua, education, religion, recreation. They don't use the word platform, but I think that's understood in everything that is to be done. The Latin phrase "mirabile dictu" means basically it's wonderful to say, or to be able to say, that Chautauqua is synonymous with the American experience, the American heritage, imagination, promise, and ideal. Teddy Roosevelt is alleged to have said it's the most American thing American. So, for balance, Rudyard Kipling said, it's a real bore. However, I'm with Roosevelt that it's put it all together for me. There is a generosity of spirit, there is civility, and there's the idea that effort is worthwhile, it's expected, and it's also meritorious. And if you were here, if this were, let's say, 1904, and we were in Chautauqua, we would be listening to John Philip Sousa music, and we would be feeling pretty